and a lot of hope towards what the future needs to bring is actually what people need now more than anything else. And this candidacy has brought that to people in the sense that it's not about, is this person too young to run, but saying this is the moment we're going to do what we should have done a long time ago, which is elect a fresh voice with new ideas and a new perspective. And that motion forward is really what is getting people enrolled in this campaign. And we're inspired by that every single day.
I'm really excited to see millennials running for office. So I have to admit, I'm actually Generation X. I suppose we were talking in an earlier segment about how I'm sort of the tail end of Generation X. And it's weird to me. I remember my mom saying, the moment that's going to be hardest for you is when you start seeing doctors who are younger than you. And, that's been a while for me now. I'm almost 40, but, now seeing congressional candidates, lots of them who are younger than me, it's like, okay, no, this is a good thing, but it's weird.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that when I raise my hand and say, I'm a millennial running for Congress, a lot of people have the mental image that millennials are still in college, right? That millennials are much younger. They're still playing video games at home. And the fact is the millennial generation is so broad. So I'm 34 and I'm at what I'll say is the beginning of the millennial generation. But you have 18 to 36-year-olds who all fall into that category. And, what I've told people is over the last 10 years, we have seen this generation essentially reinvent every single major industry, from business to communications and everything in between. And they've had a couple of principles while doing it. I mean, we've looked at things like, how do we push compassion harder? How do we make sure there's transparency and openness? And through all that innovation and all that renovation of businesses and industries, the last frontier that has remained virtually untouched is government. And we have this prime opportunity to take that stand and to introduce such a new voice to an institution in Washington, D.C. that needs it so badly. And that is exciting for me.
What do you hear from millennials when you speak with them during your campaigning? What sorts of things do they ask you? What sorts of trends do you notice?
This generation and my generation, we place a lot of value on listening first and engaging, of course. And I think one of the things that is most inspiring to people is a couple things. First and foremost, that they can see themselves in someone else. And I think we talked about this earlier. Someone that they could say, okay, we've experienced the same thing. I see part of myself in you. And that relatability is very important. But I think the other thing, and this is just a style difference for me, which is I think my job as a representative is going to be to listen first and ensure that I understand and seek to understand how people need my representation, and then making sure that I take that to Washington, D.C. And that's a little bit of a different approach from how many other representatives have historically seen their role. And that listening action is something that I think is very much a stylistic draw for a lot of millennials that I engage with on the campaign trail.
Do you think that there are particular issues? We've talked a little bit about student loan debt and things like that. Do you think that there are other issues that sort of unite millennials in general as a voting bloc, if there is such a thing?
I think the largest thing that we have to remember in a lot of these races across the country is there are going to be some threads, right? There's a thread around student loans. There's a thread around healthcare that binds a lot of this generation together. But I think the other piece we have to remember is that politics are local and representation needs to be local. So I think from my perspective, at least here in Southern California, there's everything that is tied to what I would say cost of living is very much important. So affordable housing is important. Education and student loans is important. But the other thing we have to remember is this is also the same generation that grew up with the dreamers as their best friends in high school, that grew up with dreamers who went through college with them, who are their doctors, who are now their kids' teachers. And I think immigration and ensuring that we maintain this idea of dignity, respect, and the American dream for everyone is also something that is absolutely critical and a core value for this generation overall.
So the millennials that you're talking about, and maybe even the post-millennials, the
Mm-hmm.
18-year-olds, do you think that they're going to come out and vote in November?
I think they are. I mean, we always talk about here in Southern California, we've talked about the several X factors that exist, the younger vote being one of them. I think one of the things that we have to be careful of is saying that they don't vote, because a lot of times they do. And as a matter of fact, we saw a significant turnout from them in the 2016 election. But here's the caveat. The caveat is that as we start to think about who these endorsements go towards from a candidate perspective, who the party gets behind, we have to make sure that we're not force-feeding candidates to this generation, because this generation is going to be picky. They're going to be selective, and they want to make sure that they can actually be represented, and they have to be inspired and motivated by the candidates that are running. So millennial turnout is not something to just be assumed is going to happen because Donald Trump is having a tough 18 months in office and he's letting a lot of us down in the policies and the relationships that he's having both domestically and abroad. It's going to have a lot to do with candidates and what type of energy and passion and momentum they bring forward and how well they listen to this generation overall. That's what's going to get the turnout. And that possibly may be different than how politics as usual has operated up until this point.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we know about you or Southern California or soccer or millennials?
Well, I will give a shout out to my Michigan State Spartans going into March Madness strong. And I will also say, you can learn more about me and the campaign. My website is www.Kotick, that's Kotick, the number 4, Congress.com. And we are nationally looking for people who can definitely volunteer and chip in their own way. So if you're looking to get involved in a race that maybe your race isn't as critical wherever you live, we're doing remote phone banking. We're doing a lot of different pieces of action, because if there's one thing that we learned, and we saw it with John McCain's thumbs down for healthcare, is that we all need to get involved and step up in our own ways, whether it's in our backyard or across the country. And I think we all feel ownership over that. And we're looking for folks across the country to help us out with our campaign as well.
And the Republican you are running against is known as Putin's favorite congressman, I believe.
His favorite congressman, yes. So Dana Rohrabacher is a 28-year incumbent. I like to say that he was first elected when I was going into kindergarten. So he's been in Congress for quite some time. And he's, I would invite people to look him up. He's very backwards on a lot of things. He thinks that climate change is a hoax. He thinks that we should deport all undocumented immigrants in this country without any reservation. I mean, there are a lot of things that are disconnected from the reality of what this country is today and what we all know to be true. So it's time that his seat gets flipped. This is a prime opportunity, and I believe I'm the candidate to do it.
And your primary is in June, is that right?
Yep, the primary is in June 5th, and then the general in November.
And you guys have that weird jungle primary system in California.
It's the jungle out here, that's for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts on millennials. That was really good for us to hear. I have to start thinking of millennials as people who are responsible and voting. And so part of this episode is also helping me wrap my brain around the fact that people much younger than I am are running for office. So
you bet.
So thanks so much.
And thank both of you for stepping up and taking this action to educate people and get involved in your own way. And it's inspiring to us as candidates to see the energy that you guys bring forward as well. So thank you very much.
Welcome back, listeners. For this segment, we have with us Spencer Bounds, who is running for Texas State House in District 82. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get involved in politics? How did you come to be running for the Texas House of Representatives?
Sure. Kind of an interesting story. Until about 2014, I was a Republican. But it was one of those things where I was a Republican because my parents were. And once I started really paying attention, I realized I wasn't actually a Republican at all. It was the 2014 Texas governor's race that really kind of sparked it all. It was just kind of a nasty race, really personal attacks from the Republican to the Democratic side. The Republican Party was still trying to slash education and then complain that schools were failing, and then slash education some more because obviously that's a solution. And the Republican Party still had things like gay conversion therapy in the official party platform. And it was just, I'd had about enough. So I donated some money to Wendy Davis, who was running for governor then, and some other groups. And Battleground Texas, a few weeks after that, called me and asked me if I wanted to be an organizing fellow working on the governor's race. And I readily agreed. And it's just kind of gone from there. It's hard for me to believe that it's been almost 4 years since I've been basically dedicating my life to this in one way or another. As for me being a candidate, I had no intention of being a candidate this cycle. I moved back to my hometown of Midland, and I had intended to spend this year basically party building. I wanted to get this county and a lot of the surrounding counties, some of them don't even have county chairs. I wanted to get county chairs and precinct chairs in. I wanted to get groups like Democratic Women and Coalition of Black Democrats, et cetera, started. And then, of course, my Young Democrats activism. I remain the West Texas Regional Director for the Texas Young Democrats, as well as the chair of the TYD Rural Non-Urban Caucus. And so I basically wanted to focus on that, move home, kind of get my life together, and just do what I needed to do from the back end. It's kind of my background is sort of running county parties and getting club chapters started, et cetera. But I went down to the state Democratic Executive Committee meeting, the SDEC meeting, the weekend before the filing deadline. And we still didn't have any Democrat running for the seat. And, I'd spent about the last year running around the state saying we have to run people in every seat. We have to run people. We have to run people. And through the course of that weekend, about 20 different people came up to me and asked me to run. And I was actually driving back to Midland from Austin the day before the filing deadline. And I got a call that said they had found a donor to pay for the $750 filing fee if I would turn around and come back and file. And I did. And none of that is to say that I'm not proud to be here and loving every second of it. It just was unexpected, for sure.
Did you have to collect signatures to file as well?
No, you have the option of doing one or the other in Texas.
Okay.
And since it was the day before, the paying the money was the only way to do it.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, how can you possibly get that many signatures that quickly? You probably could in Chicago, but most other places might be difficult. So we'll come back to your story in a bit, but can you tell us a little bit about what your district is like? So you said it's West Texas. You said Midland. Can you tell us a little bit about what that area is? When we did our episode on Texas, we just, by virtue of the people we ended up talking to, talked a lot more about East Texas. And so interested in hearing a little bit more about what West Texas looks like, what kind of people live in your region.
West Texas is for the most part, very rural. Even our largest cities, Midland being one of certainly the top 3 largest cities, we maybe have about 150,000 people right now. And to us, that's huge. Midland specifically, Midland County, city of Midland, is sort of the home of the oil business. The Permian Basin has half of the oil and gas rigs that are operating right now in the country, which means that we have a substantial percentage of all oil and gas rigs in the world. Midland, on the surface, is very rich. This is one of those places where if you're so willing to go work in certain parts of the oil field, you can make $40 an hour to start. But the flip side to that is places like Dawson County, which is 2 counties north of Midland. It's in my district. Dawson County has about 13,000 people, and over a fifth of the people of that county live in poverty. Over